Okay, we are recording.
Thank you. So we have Dr. Rudy here. Wonderful. Okay, so
Okay.
people are keep on joining, so that's good.
Okay. You want to officially start in about 2 minutes or whatever you say?
3:05 will be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see my family all joined. I'm so excited.
Nice. I'm gonna guess it's all the ones that say Bemmel.
Yes.
Bell?
I brought the whole bus. And I
Nice.
see some friends. This is wonderful.
I had many that were unable to make it and just said, please send recording and post it.
Yeah, will do. And the goal is also to inspire us as a sister city organization to do more, because we get a lot of joy from our people attending and watching our programming, and we get the email saying, hey, I will follow after 1 year and say, I was really inspired to attend your International Women's Day event, and it was the last face-to-face event pre-pandemic, and I took XYZ steps to actually create something different, like to take my life to the next level. So we get like, super inspired by that. Okay, 1 more minute.
Okay. Ready to roll?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. I'm gonna mute myself, so we all should mute, so we only unmute ourselves when we're part of the recording, so that way we have a clear recording session. Thank you.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good evening and good morning to everybody. This is truly an International Women's Day. We really have women from all over the world on this event today, and I couldn't be more honored to be a part of this event. Thank you, Julia Costin, for coming up with this idea and not allowing COVID to stop us from interacting with the rest of the world, but instead you've brought the world together. And this is what Sister Cities is all about. And leave it to women like her to make this a reality. And I really greatly appreciate it. You know, I was looking up the oldest novel in the world and trying to, just for the fun of it, going through the internet and seeing what it was. Robinson Crusoe came up. I'm sure that's arguable. I don't know, maybe in the Western world. But then I recalled from my days of living in Japan, and I did a little more research, all unofficial internet research. And one of the oldest novels and one of the greatest novels in that country, there were actually two of them, and they were both written by women in the early 11th century. Their names were Sei Shonagon, who wrote a book called The Pillow Book, and Lady Murasaki, a lady in waiting at the Japanese royal court, who wrote the most famous book of all time, The Tale of Genji, in the early 11th century. So it's amazing that at a time like that, when Japan was so male dominated, that the greatest literary masterpieces for that country were written by women, and that these women have withstood the test of time over there, and they are studied throughout the Western world now and sold in English throughout the Western world too. And it's for this reason and just this amazing group that we have today with this meeting that I am just so honored to be among the amazing group of women authors that we have on this panel. And with that, I'd like to introduce Julia Costin.
Well, hello everyone and welcome. It's truly an honor to welcome everyone, every single part of the world on this Zoom session. And most importantly, this Zoom session will be shared with other communities with those that were not able to attend with us today. So I'm just gonna share with you a short video that has been sent to us by the Mayor of Australia, Mayor Tate. And Marianne has done such a fantastic job. She's with us today to maintain that relationships with the sister city in Australia, Gold Coast, for so many years. So that's another relationship that it basically will show the resilience, right? Because community change, people change, administration changes, and it's the people that make those relationships work. And Marianne and Katrina, who's listening in today, has done a fantastic job to maintain that relationship. So thank you for that.
Hi, I'm Mayor Tom Tate from the Gold Coast, Australia. And I'd like to extend friendly greetings and well wishes to our friends in Fort Lauderdale. Thank you for inviting the Gold Coast to join your event today as you honour the achievements and positive contributions women make to our communities. You have a wonderful list of female authors speaking today, one of them being a Gold Coaster, and I hope you all enjoy hearing her story. I commend you on hosting this webinar as part of the International Women's Day celebrations and wish you all the best. Hi, I'm Mayor Tom Tate for a successful event.
I apologize about that. It was just a little bit of a glitch there, but we're so honored to have Mayor Tate welcoming us and just to know that we have the support from our communities, from the leadership that creates an environment for women and everyone to flourish, for diversity. So I just want to have Marianne say a couple of words. She's our chair for Australia, and she's managing the relationship with Gold Coast, Australia. Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you, Julia, of course, for that opportunity to share the remarks from Mayor Tate. I want to especially give thanks to Katrina Metcalf, who has been an anchor for all of us in Gold Coast, Australia. And as you mentioned, leadership or administrations change, but Katrina has been around a long time, has kept us all together, very interested in everything we do in Fort Lauderdale, offers opportunities for us to do many events. And I think after the last couple of conversations that we've had with Katrina, we'll look forward to many events like this. It's wonderful to have Ali here with us. We'll hear her speak about her wonderful book, and a dear friend of mine, Mirella Baker, who just reading her book, I've asked her if she would do it. Is she ready to write it in other languages? Because it's a global book. It's for everybody. I learned the most important description of architecture of my own personal life. Personal architecture. That's a new word for me. And I learned in the first few pages of your book something special. And Laura, I'm looking forward to learning more about you. But welcome to all of you to Greater Fort Lauderdale Sister Cities' first webinar, authors webinar. Julia, up to you.
Thank you, Marianne. And I hope this is going to be one of the many webinars we're going to be showcasing women authors in our communities. So the goal for today's program is, I think we all have a shared vision. Either we live in a certain community in our sister cities, we are leaders within those communities, or with constituents, right? We all want our communities to flourish. And we also want our constituents to be empowered and have access to the resources to provide them not only with a job, but to provide them with a very successful and meaningful life. And most importantly, I think all of those communities want to be more inclusive, right? So for the past couple of years, we've all seen diversity and inclusion as a topic in every single report, either it's World Economic Forum, United Nations, and so on. We all want to create a room for those that are underrepresented. So in this case, with our goal today is to showcase the accomplishments of women in our sister cities, where we can get more inspired by more empowered and take some action, right? And the topic for today is miles apart, but together for change, right? So we all remember that point in our lives where we watched a movie, we saw a speaker sharing something that actually triggers something in our mind that we want to take action. We want to do more for ourselves, but most importantly, we want to do more for others. And I think change comes from within personally, and change comes within in a community. So instead of looking forward to get that new scheme or program that we're going to implement in our local community, so we have opportunities for our constituents, I think those that live in those communities can collaborate, can connect, can unite, and can to come together to change and reshape and bring opportunities to that particular community, either a sister city or whatever that may be. So with no further ado, I want to welcome everyone joining us today. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Dr. Baker and Laura, for being here, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your journey with us. And I'm not personally connected with Ellie and Dr. Baker because we just connected now with the event, but I met Laura more than 10 years ago. And I met her at a conference, a tech conference, and she was sharing some, she was hosting a workshop about her book. And I got really, really inspired. And it touched me in such a way that I wasn't curious about those technology companies were sharing with us and what are the new technologies and what is the market trend for future. I actually read her book at the conference, and we got connected back then, and we still collaborate, and we're still doing little steps to change the world together, or change at least our communities. So she's been my speaker for so many events, and she's inspired so many people with her wisdom. So thank you, Laura, and thank you, Ellie, and thank you, Dr. Baker. Before we start, I would not do justice to our authors if I will try to go over their bio and read it from a piece of paper. I would like them to just give us a couple of, cover a couple of minutes about their background professionally, how they got here and so on. And I think that would be better received than me reading their bio from a piece of paper. So I want to welcome Ellie. And before Ellie starts, I want to share a video of her current book, Shiver, with you all. And then we can all start. And bear with me with my technology, please. Trying to find the right screen to share here. Okay, did I get it right? Thank you, Ali. I got that right. So finally, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much. So I'm Ali Reynolds, and my debut thriller Shiver is out now. It just came out in January. Many years ago, I used to be a freestyle snowboarder competing at halfpipe, and I was once in the top 10 in the UK. After that, I moved to Gold Coast in Australia, where I was an English teacher for many years. And I'm a mum of 2 little kids. I work at home, and now I'm a full-time writer. Thank you.
Yeah, so we before we get started into the panel, can you tell us about your journey? How did you get started to get here, your professional background and so on?
Sure. Like, would you like me to give like the complete speech, you mean, or just the
Yeah,
introduction?
the complete speech, so that way we don't
Okay,
have.
sorry, I didn't follow. I thought we were all introducing each other. Sorry. Yes, of course. So I will tell you a little bit about my thriller Shiver. So Shiver begins as 5 former friends are invited to a isolated mountaintop reunion in a tiny ski resort in the French Alps. 10 years earlier, they were snowboarders training and competing at the same tiny resort until tragedy struck. So now it's the off season. The ski lifts are running just for them to take them to the mountaintop reunion venue. As they go up the cable car, there's confusion over who invited them. When they reach the top, the ski lodge there is dark and deserted. An icebreaker game has been laid out for them. The game reveals some of their darkest secrets and suggests that one of them is a killer. If they want to get off the mountain alive, they must decide who to trust and figure out what really happened that winter 10 years ago. So my journey to writing this book really began a very long time ago with my parents. I actually dedicated this book to them. It says, "For my mum and dad, mountain people." So my parents were mountaineers. They even met through their mountaineering clubs a long time ago when their respective mountaineering clubs double booked the same mountain hut. As a child, every childhood holiday, we loaded the car with camping stuff and we went to the mountains, the Lake District in England, the Peak District, Scotland, and the European Alps. I learnt to ski from a really young age, and I switched to snowboarding as a teenager. And by my late teens, I was obsessed. So in my early 20s, I spent 5 winters training and then competing at snowboard halfpipe. And I lived in France, Switzerland, Austria, and Canada. It was very much the early years of the sport. I think the first winter that I did it was the first year that snowboarding officially became an Olympic sport. I dreamt of one day competing in the Olympics, but it was also a very dangerous sport. I suffered a lot of injuries. I found sponsors one year, then broke knee ligaments and lost the sponsors and had to start all over again. By the time I was 26, 2 of my close female friends had broken their necks doing the tricks that I knew I would need to try to climb further up the rankings. They were told they would never walk again. Fortunately, they did, but it made a big impact on me. So I decided to pull out of the sport, grateful to still be relatively in one piece. So my writing journey began a long time ago. My very first job was in a bookstore when I was 14, and I was obsessed with Agatha Christie. I used to spend all my salary on books. And after that, I started trying to write novels. In my first winter in France, I kept a journal writing about this amazing icy white world at the top of a mountain. And during all my snowboarding winters after that, I used to take my ancient word processor out in my car, and I was starting to write a novel set in the mountains. But I couldn't quite get it working. So after I finished snowboarding, I went on to become an English teacher. I wrote for many years as a hobby, and I tried several more books. I switched to writing short stories and eventually began getting many published in women's magazines. After I had 2 small children, it was very hard to work as a teacher when they were very little. So I eventually focused more on writing and switched to becoming a full-time writer 2 years ago when more and more stories began getting published. By that time, I'd written about 5 attempted novels. None of them had been published. I couldn't even get them finished. I used to just get in a mess with storyline. And then I finally decided I should start planning my next novel. So I read every book on storycraft that I could get my hands on. I studied plot and story structure. I spent a whole month planning Shiva. And after that, I found it was very quick to write. I wrote it in 6 months. Part of the inspiration behind it was I'm a big fan of thrillers and crime novels, but we often see women portrayed as weak or as victims in those stories. So I longed to write a novel where women were very strong as the men in the story and not victims. One source of inspiration for Shiva was Agatha Christie's fantastic novel, And Then There Were None. I wanted to take her concept of a group of people being invited to a remote location under false pretenses and then trapped there with a killer amongst their midst and give it a contemporary twist. So the characters were snowboarders on a glacier. Another source of inspiration was from the mountains themselves. So around the time I started writing, I saw a news article. Some hikers out walking in Austria had seen a hand and 2 shoes protruding from the ice. They called in the mountain rescue teams and they uncovered the body of a man who'd gone missing 30 years earlier. It struck me that if someone goes missing in such high mountain terrain, we might not find them for many years. We might not know if their death was an accident or something more sinister, or even if they're really there at all. Maybe they simply chose to disappear. The mountains really make the perfect place to disappear. So then I got wondering about who might like to do something sinister to somebody in the mountains. And the answer seemed to be perhaps their sporting rival. So then I got studying sports and competition. I was very lucky that when I was snowboarding, the other snowboarders that I met and trained with were the nicest bunch of people imaginable. But apparently this is not always the case. And I heard so many stories about top athletes in other sports playing mind games with their rivals. It's very common in rugby, soccer, basketball, boxing, for athletes to use intimidation strategies and other tactics. It seemed to me that we hadn't really seen that much in fiction. So it just made a great theme for a psychological thriller. I also think athletes make very interesting characters. We don't see them that much in fiction. We tend to admire top athletes, but to reach the top, really, they need a certain ruthlessness. So again, that seemed to me that they made great thriller characters. So I started writing Shiva, and once it was ready, I found a London agent. And then, to my delight, the book went to auction in the UK. It ended up in a 10 publisher auction, and now it is sold to date in 23 countries. I'm delighted that it will be translated into 22 languages. The TV option has also sold, so hopefully it's going to be turned into a 6 to 8 part TV series. It's been an absolute dream for any writer. I think when you start out writing, you dream of getting published, but you never know if it will happen. And I feel extremely lucky and fortunate. Writing is my dream job. I would say that I've learned everything that I know about writing from reading. So I've always been a really massive reader. And what I like to do is read a book and then analyze it and see what works for me. What do I like about it? What can I learn from it? Or what doesn't work for me? And I make notes on it. I read a lot of books by debut writers from all over the world. I'm really fascinated by what sells well in a particular country and what makes certain books come off. One book that really made a massive impression on me was Robert McKee's book Story. He says we go to the movies or we get interested in a story because we want to be taken to a strange new world. And that for me is very much what I wanted to do. So I hope that my book Shiver takes you to an icy world at the top of a mountain where anything can happen. It's a world full of natural dangers like cliffs and crevasses and avalanches. So yeah, that's very much the appeal of writing for me. Right now I'm working on a second thriller, which is set here where I live in Gold Coast, Australia, and I hope that that will come out next year. So thank you very much for inviting me to tell you about my book and speak for International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. We're so happy and thrilled to have you here. And I never thought about those things. Like, you just opened a new world for me regarding athletes and sports and everything. Like, even, I mean, you know, study business major, but I wouldn't think to research like what books sell like best in other countries and so on, and do like a research on that, because I never had to sell books, but very fascinating. So thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. So we're going to go next to Dr. Baker.
Hi, everyone. I am just really delighted to be here. I'm very excited to talk about my book and have you learn more about it. I'll start with a little bit of background so that you know where I started and what brought me to writing this book. I'm originally from Suriname in South America, a very small country with, at this point, a little bit over 500,000 people. It's a very small population. And I lived there until I was about 20. And that's the time that I decided to move to the United States with my parents' blessings, who agreed that they were going to give me the opportunity to go abroad and study. But I want to give you a little bit of my background so that you can understand where the foundation of my book really comes from. And so Suriname is a very tiny country, and it started out as a colony from the Netherlands. And in 1975, it got its independence, and it was initially seemed like a nice idea, but quickly turned into some commotion and unrest, where eventually in 1980, the military took over. And that's when a lot of turmoil started, where we're talking about civil war, where people were afraid to even go on the street. There were shortages of food. I actually remember having to stand in line with a coupon, which basically entitled you to only get the items that were listed. And so you were able to get a little bit of rice, some oil, and some of the very basic necessities. And so that left a very deep mark on me and pretty much everybody who experienced it. It is something that, of course, rocks your foundation. People were going through times when, you know, some didn't even know where their next meal was going to come from because it was that difficult. The borders were closed at some point. And there was all the intimidation that you read about in stories about military coups when that happens, and you know, curfews where you're not even allowed to go on the street. Otherwise, you don't know if you're going to make it out alive, etc. So those were things that we lived. And I remember sitting on the balcony listening to, you know, gunshots. There was no radio station, so my father had to actually use a little transistor radio to get the news from the Netherlands so that we could find out what was going on in our own country. So I'm telling you all this because these are the types of things that kind of shape who you are, and they leave a mark. They leave quite an impression. And so it was one of the things that shaped who I ultimately became. That was in 1980, and then in 1982, there was another incident with the military. So politically, it was very rocky. In 1984, I ended up losing my sister. My sister drowned. It was a very traumatic accident. Now thinking back, she was such a hero as she was trying to save her friend. She lost her life. And that too was something that left such an impression and such a scar, because at that young age, I wasn't quite, you know, familiar with all the tools that I needed to get out of my trauma and stress. And I was young, I was very young. And my sister dying was really my first experience with death. And it came with such trauma because she drowned. So it was something that happened so suddenly, and it was so very traumatic. So you can imagine how my foundation was really affected by that. So I'm going to fast forward a bit because unfortunately, there were many more people I buried after my sister's death, uncles, aunts, grandparents, you know, eventually my father and friends, you know, you name it. And so those are people who passed away. And there were so many other hurdles that I overcame and eventually grew from. And the growth is something that as I got older, I started to appreciate it more and more, because although death sounds like it's very traumatic, there is another side. If you can only kind of cross that path of, you know, hurt and pain and look on the other side, there's always something else there. And so I tell you all of this because I want to kind of introduce you to what my book is about. And I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint so that I can show you what the book is basically built on. And I've used a metaphor. And the metaphor really is where I have the reader make a comparison between their life and a house. And so Marianne said it so nicely earlier when she mentioned about my book. She said she never really thought about her life, you know, herself as an architect of her own life. The name of my book is Building Blocks to an Abundant Life, Design the Life You Desire. And so this is really a book that gives you insights on other people's journeys, including my own, where I share with the reader just some practical ways of looking at things a little differently. So this is not a 10 steps on how to get a wonderful life at all. It's a book that offers opportunities for self-reflection. And as I just mentioned, there is a lot of sociology involved because I use the metaphor of a house. I am a sociologist. I am a professor of sociology, have been now for over 20 years. And so sociology is very deeply rooted in me. But those people who don't know nothing about sociology will still be able to understand the symbolism that I use. And so, for example, in each chapter, I highlight how you can compare a house and how you might want to rebuild it if it's not necessarily how you want it to be, and how you now can compare that to parts of your life. So for example, I start out with the foundation, which I gave you my foundation to kind of just share with you how this can serve as a way for you to reflect and see, is there a crack in your foundation that you might want to take a closer look at and possibly try to repair? Because if you don't have a solid foundation, life is not going to be on solid ground. You need to figure out how you can maybe overcome some of the issues that might have been there caused by issues that are maybe genetic, or perhaps you had some problems in your family. Perhaps there was something in your culture that really caused you to have something that causes a block. So what I've done is I've invited people that are very close to me to share their story. And once I decided what the structure of the book was going to look like, I very carefully thought about who had a story that kind of related to the structure of a house. And again, the idea is to try to see if there is room for remodeling, right? So I would like the reader to reflect on the story and the chapter. And then at the end of every chapter, I give an opportunity for them to sit down and just really reflect, redesign, and hopefully remodel. What can you do to make some positive changes so that you can make your life more abundant? And so in the foundation chapter, I talk about something like culture, and someone shares a story about the impact that culture had on them. Some of the stories that were shared, and I have to tell you, I was moved by the vulnerability of the people that agreed to write their story. So for example, in the section on religion and spirituality, there is a story shared by Doreen who lost her daughter. And she has given me permission to be honest and open about this. And this is really the story about my sister who died. Doreen is my mother. She's actually also attending today. So I just want to give a shout out to Doreen. But she very openly shares about the story of how my sister passed away. But then the resilience that comes out of it is really how she turned to religion and her faith to get her through this. And so while not all the readers will necessarily relate to each and every practical, piece that's shared, the idea is for you to reflect and see what it can offer you for self-reflection and growth. And I have another chapter on doors, and the doors are really a way for you to look to see what you allow in and what you don't. Is there something that's blocked? So someone shares a story about their divorce and how it made such an impact that it even gave them moments where they felt that they wanted to commit suicide. So it goes into the story of this particular person who overcame that hurdle and came out again on the other side. So the roof reflects like our finances and our insurance. We need a roof over our head. What are we doing to make sure that that is in place? So some tips are offered so people can kind of think about what are we doing. So I'm going to take you to the next slide, which shows you just some pictures that again can kind of get you to see the relationship between a house and your life. So in the picture on the left, you see things like, you actually can see some pillars. Imagine that a pillar is ugly and you want to remove it. Well, sometimes pillars are essential. So you can't just say, well, I'm just going to get rid of a pillar here. And so pillars for me, I identified certain pillars that are important to me. But of course, everybody would have to figure out what the pillars are for them that are important. But I identified things like honesty and integrity, empathy, fairness, justice, kindness, and forgiveness. So if one of your pillars seems to be either broken or you feel that it needs to be replaced, then it's time to kind of dig deep and reflect and see, well, what can I do here to remodel my house? So every chapter, as I mentioned, ends with those three things: reflect, redesign, and remodel, where I give you some things to just kind of think about. So additional stories that were shared throughout the book are in the chapter on rooms. There's a story on someone who was struggling with their sexuality and coming out. The chapter on pillars has a story on someone and how they dealt with cancer and the struggles that came along with that. Forgiveness is one of the pillars that I go into. And that's where someone shared their story about an intimate relationship and rape, sexual assault, and how they dealt with this. And then there's also a chapter on walls where someone talks about their career and how they had some struggles in the beginning and eventually they turned things around and became very successful. There's another story on health and someone who has a vision impairment. And they talk about how they were able to kind of deal with that and look at the bright side of things as well. So I can go on, but I know that we have a limited time. But as I mentioned, this is not a 10-step on how to have a wonderful life and be abundant. It really is a book about self-reflection, looking a little bit deeper, but really making a concerted effort to make changes so that your life can improve. And so while you might not necessarily do it the exact same way that are outlined in the book, hopefully you'll be able to reflect and come up with your own ways that work for you. So that in a nutshell is really what my book is about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Baker, for sharing with us. This is amazing. I think I've read every single book out there available on self-help and, redesigning your life and tips, 10 steps to do XYZ just to kind of hack the system and get faster to reaching my goals. But I've never seen this particular approach to it. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for going into your personal story and sharing the candid story with us, because that's very important to know and to acknowledge who we are, learn from our past, and redesign the future. So thank you. Well, with no further ado, I would like also to welcome Laura Stewart. She's amazing. Similarly, like any other speaker in the panel we have, she has a personal story that is always changes something on my perspective whenever I read the book or whenever I hear her talk. So welcome, and I'm very happy to have you here.
Julia, I'm so honored to be able to call you friend. And you personally are an inspiration to me as well, with all the things that I've seen you do over the number of years that I've known you. So thank you for being an inspiration to me. It's a joy to be here with everybody and to be on an event that's got a sister city in Australia is really special, because Australia has really embraced my message and my book for many, many, many years, including from when I was a geek. I did a lot of peer group work with tech companies in Australia. So Australia holds a place near and dear in my heart. And sometime after COVID, I am hoping to finally get there. So my book is What Would a Wise Woman Do? Questions to Ask Along the Way. And you'll probably see that it says Atchison at the end here after the name Stewart. I was married when this book got published. I am now divorced. But I am going to change the cover at some point. But a really funny story, when the book came out, my now ex-husband swears that the reason I married him was so that I would be at the top of the bookshelves instead of at the end of the bookshelves. So I moved from an S to an A. So that, and that's really kind of an interesting thing about being an author, is having to think about those things. So I've said I was a geek, and it's because, not only do I have degrees in computer science and management and organizational behavior, but I literally used to teach geeks to be geekier. I had every master level certification to teach geeks how to deal with all the back end of keeping businesses running with technology. So rather than geek, I prefer intellectual badass. I don't know about you guys, but intellectual badass just really fits everybody that's on this call today, because we do have a certain level of wisdom and knowledge, and each of us in our own way is a badass in our own fields and in our own lives. We just have to embrace that. And that's really where my journey took me over the years. I'm just going to share my screen here to show you a little something that is near and dear and special to me as to how my author journey started. This is my mom and I when my book came out. I went from owning a technology services company, a multi-state company, which I owned, created, founded, and sold after 15 years. I was written up in every technology magazine in my industry because, you know what? I was one of a few women back in the day that had their own tech company and was going into Fortune 50 companies and small businesses and advising on technology. When I sold my company, and my contract ended with the company that bought my company, I had to decide what I wanted to do next. And my mom, who I love dearly, who passed away 3 years ago, just developed this love, like Allie talked about, of reading. And she said she could never afford to keep me in books. So she got me a library card and would drop me off. And I would just take stacks and stacks of books out of the library. That love of reading also gave me a love of writing. I used to edit my school newspapers and the yearbooks. I had a multi-year column in a newspaper. It morphed into writing magazine articles. And for 5 years, I had a broadcast radio show as well. It is still a podcast. I'm no longer on broadcast because I don't need to do broadcast anymore. But that love of reading took me to a career of writing that my mom said, Laura, you ask amazing questions, because my mom taught me that the right questions can change your life. But questions, I've learned, are all about perspective, right? So this is a picture of my brother, my mom, and I. This is one of the last pictures I have of him. He passed away about 6 months later at the age of 10. And as I was deciding after I left my tech company, what is it I could possibly do? I knew I wanted to write a book, and I had had newspaper columns. I had spoken on stages around the world, but the idea of becoming a full-time writer seemed like something I couldn't do. But then I thought about this perspective, right? And my mom teaching me about the power of questions, and my brother one day being there and then not. And I realized that we can do anything we want as long as we are willing to shift what we know about ourselves and what we think of ourselves. So looking at this picture of my brother and I, you would think that I had the best life in the world, and I did. But I never thought that I would be a geek or that I would write a #1 international bestseller that was on the charts for over 90 weeks. Except I did, because I learned to ask how to question my questions. And my favorite thing is to ask why. And when I first decided to write the book, one of the things that was so powerful for me was I wrote a book proposal. So if any of you are out there thinking about writing, especially a nonfiction book, okay? Fiction books, you're really not writing book proposals, but for nonfiction books, writing a book proposal is writing your business plan, or as Mirella was talking about, figuring out your house. And what are the different pieces? What are the walls? What are the rooms? What are you going to put in them? And writing a book proposal laid it out so easily for me of where I was going to take my book, which ended up being about how to ask the right questions. And in it, I lay out a theme of the process that you can use to ask the right questions around finance, around business, around crisis. I mean, heck, we just all have been through a year of craziness with COVID, and personal crisis came up for so many people. I lost so many people that I know to COVID. They passed away. Others still sick from it. Businesses completely changed and altered. And I've seen other people launch amazing businesses, start amazing new careers, write amazing books. Look at what Allie has achieved and done and launched. It's amazing what can happen if you're willing to ask the right questions. When I wrote the book proposal, I went to an event with book proposal in hand, met 2 agents who bid over me, and then landed a publisher immediately. found the best literary attorney in the world. And everybody said, Laura, how did you do it so fast? It's because I got really clear about who I was, what I represented, and what I had hoped to achieve, and how I could change lives in the world. And that is something beautiful about the Sister Cities organization, is how it puts people with different perspectives together, even though you're miles apart, right? As Julia said, the point of this event today is miles apart, but together for change. It's about learning the questions we're each asking and supporting each other. Because if you ask the right question of the wrong person, your answer might not be the right one. It's important to get those two of those aligned. And for my entire life, I've just been so in awe of people who write books and publish books. And now I've got several of them out there, and I'm working on another one called A Space Between Two Breaths, about my mom passing and how there's so much time between two breaths that we think of as so short, but it can be an eternity to make changes and choices in our lives if we learn to ask the right questions, and to be with amazing people from around the world that offer us alternatives to thinking, because we often have very narrow perspectives based on the perspectives of our own situations and the situations of those around us. So Julia, Russell, Marianne, I want to thank you all for having me here today, for allowing me to talk about this book that is so near and dear to my heart. And up on my website, laurastewart.com, anybody is welcome to get free chapters of the book, and also download a workbook that I offer for free to help everybody ask some better questions. So thank you all for allowing me to be here. And Mirella and Allie, it's such a joy to have heard your stories and to learn from them. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate everything you've shared with us today, and I appreciate what everyone has shared today. We're gonna take questions from the audience. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in a chat. I personally have a question, and the common theme that has come across all the speakers today, they share with us, it's loss, right? We all have personal losses. We lose the dear friends, careers, and so on. And this year has been a year that everyone has been going through a lot of losses because of COVID. So what would you all share with us, how we can take that energy and turn it into something positive when we are facing adversity, when we think the world is against us, and put a positive spin on it? You can all free to chime in. I don't have a...
I'll chime in. Marianne will tell you that I am one of those people that is always looking for solutions and positivity. You know, when we are dealing with trauma, stress, loss, etc., which is something inevitable, that's life, we have to find ways to overcome it. And sometimes that means digging deep and doing it ourselves. Sometimes we might need professional help. You know, and so, but we need to acknowledge that this is a stressful time, but we cannot just focus on all the bad things that are happening, because there are, for every bad thing that's happening, there are a million good things that are also going on. So while we need to deal with the stress and the trauma, we can't get stuck in it. We have to go to the other side and look for the other positive things that are happening, so that our life can continue to be filled with gratitude and positive outlooks.
I would totally echo and agree with what Mirella said. And to add to that, when you're dealing with loss, so many of us just want to get to the other side of it. And what I've learned with as much loss as I've had in my life is it's not about getting to the other side. It's about processing it and growing from it. And it's okay to allow it to wash over you and wash through you. A friend of mine, after my mom died, sent me this little story that somebody had written. And basically it said that loss is like 100-foot waves. Grief is like 100-foot wave. And I guess it's kind of like an avalanche a little bit too, Allie, although not quite as much as a surfer analogy. But with the 100-foot waves, when they crash down on you, you feel like you just can't breathe. And you're just buried inside that loss. You can't see anything besides being pounded by it. Over time, that loss and that grief, the sets of the waves start having an interval a little bit more in between them. And eventually you can rise to the top of those waves and you can breathe and you're surfing at the top. And it's got to be, Allie, like this feeling of snowboarding. I am a horrible skier, by the way. I only learned after I had 2 knee surgeries. So probably not the smartest thing I ever did. Okay. But the 5 minutes I was able to stay up on my skis, that feeling of feeling weightless, that everything's okay and that you're lifted up is what gets you through to the next wave, knowing that there is a moment where you're going to lift up. And to get through loss for me, it's thinking that, okay, 100-foot wave may crash down on me today, but in another 30 seconds, I can be on top of that, and that's okay. And eventually they'll be so far apart, it's okay. And it's the people that lift you up, the people around you, the things around you. Writing has helped lift me up, and reaching out to friends, knowing that we don't have to go through loss and grief alone. Thank God for Zoom during COVID for so many people, because even though, phones are wonderful, but sometimes just being able to see somebody can make a difference.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Ellie, is it something else you'd like to add to the topic?
I don't have anything to add. I think they were beautiful and very wise answers from both Laura and Mirella.
Yeah, thank you so much. My other question is about planning, right? So planning is something that we have to do every single day, right? If we have to plan our meals, we have to plan our careers, we have to plan everything, lives and so on. With the newer generation, and I don't want to say that millennials are the one that like ruined the world for us, or the Y generation.
Because millennials are like 40 now, right?
Yes. Well, I'm millennial, but I'm, I consider myself, I'm not. But anyways.
I'm a boomer, so.
Yeah. So what I want to say is, oftentimes we forget to plan. We forget to take time to sit down to actually really think and really take action once we have put together like different scenarios and choose the best way. So what would be your advice for younger generation in terms of planning, and what are the steps and why planning is important? So not necessarily success is not defined by the number of followers you have on a social media channel or how many likes you have on your YouTube and so on. I think success is defined by what you all have achieved today, right? So I would welcome some of your answers, because I'm dealing with a lot of questions on a daily basis, how we can plan better, and why do we need to have patience when we can have an instant success?
I can start with that one. I have a new way of planning that I'm now implementing. And I've taught workshops and courses on goal setting and goal achieving and planning, but I think this is perfect to kind of launch this idea with authors. So why not plan using the idea of a book outline or book chapters? Instead of thinking like a traditional business plan or a life plan, think of it like how you would read a chapter in a book. and lay out your plan. So you're forward. What would be your legacy? What would somebody be saying about you if they introduced you at an event or at your obituary? That would be the words that somebody is saying. What's your legacy? Is your forward? The introduction would be a little bit of your life story. What are your experiences? And then each chapter builds on what you want to be doing with your life and your business. And then the epilogue is, what's your next step? What are people going to be saying about, what are you going to be saying about yourself when you've achieved everything you could think that you wanted to achieve? For me, planning is so critical to make sure that I'm moving forward. Without plans, it's very easy for me to start binge watching TV shows. Now, I do have a plan for binge watching, by the way, like which show I'm going to watch and what my snacks are going to be. But it's not the same as planning your life, like Mirella talks about. And Allie, as a professional athlete, planning had to be a massive aspect of everything you've done in your life. So my new thing for planning is to do my next set of plans like a book, chapters in a book.
I'll
Yeah,
chime in.
Yes.
Oh, Ali, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'll chime in. As I get older, I sometimes feel like I'm getting a little wiser too. And I have learned, because I am definitely a planner, sometimes to a point where my schedule is so full that I realize I need to maybe check off a few of those items and leave them for the next day. So one thing that I'm learning as I'm getting older is that not everything needs to be so planned so in, to the minute detail, to kind of relax into things a little bit and trust that it will be okay. But another thing about planning is it's not just putting it on paper, but the execution of the plan once you finally have it on paper is the most critical. And it's what I see a lot with my students, with friends, with people who I have in my trainings, workshops, is that sometimes they have ideas, but it just kind of stays there and they don't execute. And so the execution part is critical. And sometimes it takes just baby steps. I mean, if you say, for example, you want to lose 10 pounds, start with 1 or 2, because, if you start with baby steps, you're more likely to achieve the goal.
Yeah, great. So I'm just a fiction writer. So I don't really feel that I should be giving anyone self-help advice. I read self-help books, but I can only tell you what I do that helps me. I'm a single mom of 2 little boys, and I just work 24/7. So I just have to-do lists everywhere. I have a sort of long-term monthly to-do list and a daily to-do list, a weekly to-do list, and I tick those things off as I get them done. Sometimes you can get a bit overwhelmed with work that you just can't see the big picture. So something that really has helped me for ever since I was a teenager really has been journaling. So I keep a journal, and if I feel I need to, I will write about something. It's space for me to reflect about anything, relationship or family or work or just how I'm feeling. And I often find that writing down my thoughts really helps me. I can look back on it and, see how a situation might have changed or progressed over time. And it just helps me get my thoughts and my priorities clear in my head.
Thank you. Those are all great advices. So I don't have any other questions from the audience, but one question that I would like to ask for those that want to take writing to the next level. What advice would you give to, for example, myself? I like to write in numbers and bullet points, so I'm never, when I do presentation, my presentation has to be brave, and I'm a more like numbers person, and I do better with numbers and graphs than with words. So to encourage me to begin to become more passionate or having a liking towards writing, what should I implement? in my daily life activities to be able to say, okay, good, I think I got 2 pages done today.
Go ahead,
Should
Mirella.
I
Okay.
start?
All right.
No, go ahead.
Well, interestingly enough, when I started writing my book, I started with a lot of insecurity. Insecurity since English is not my first language, and I wasn't sure if this was even going to go anywhere, even though I've been here for long enough to know that I can do this. But there were some insecurities that came from that foundation that I mentioned earlier. But ultimately, I just said, I'm going to go ahead and write whatever comes in my head. I mean, I started with, of course, a very good outline, but once the outline was there, I just started writing and writing and writing, and eventually had conversations with people to, bounce ideas off of one another. And but really, it was a matter of doing it and making the commitment to write all the time. So I did take a few breaks, but picked it back up, and it was a daily commitment every day. The day starts with writing. And so that really helped me a lot, and just letting the thoughts flow.
Yeah, my advice for anybody that wants to write more is to start with keep a journal, because that's your own, private place where you can write your thoughts and your feelings without feeling self-conscious. It's very easy to feel self-conscious. I think particularly if you're wanting to write fiction, you hold yourself back. But in a journal, it's just an honest, private place to write. So that was something that really helped me. A lot of fiction writers have degrees in English, or creative masters in creative writing or something like that, but I don't think it's necessary. I think I've learned everything I know about writing from reading. You can just learn so much by becoming a huge reader, and what works for you. What lines do you like? What style do you like? My library was also a massive help to me for becoming a better writer. It just had so many resources. You can pick up debut novels just because you like the cover and dip into it without risk of, spending a lot of money if it turns out to be not for you. There are also a lot of workshops for writers available. Many of them are free. There are a lot of short courses, a lot of online ones these days that are, free or quite inexpensive. And also there is so many good books out there about writing that are available quite cheaply or from your local library. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, and to add to that, Julia, there is no right or wrong way to write. Bullet points, tables, any of that is still writing. It's your form of expressing yourself. Debbie Maycomber, I don't know if anybody here has heard of her. She has over 100 million copies of her books in print in I don't even know how many languages. Her list of New York Times bestsellers is like so long, it's crazy. She has multiple shelves in the library of her books. And I asked her once when I hit writer's block, I said, what do you do? How do you get out of writer's block? And the first thing she said was, I pray. And then the second thing she said was, get out of your house and get out of those thought processes that tell you there is only one way to write. You can speak your book and have it transcribed and then go back in and edit. You can go in a park and sit with your laptop or a pen and paper and write. You can sit in your bathroom or your bathtub. It doesn't matter if it's a word here or a word there. Express yourself. If you choose that you want to take your writings to go public and have them published, that's what editors are for. Allie, Mirella, I don't know about you, but I know that I couldn't be the writer that I am without my amazing editor. they really helped me and my reviewers of my books that I give them to before publishing. You know, writing, we like to think it's a solitary event, but it's really not. So what I do is I also don't write linearly, right? Like Einstein said, time is not linear. Writing for me is not linear. I may work on chapter 1 one day and the next hour be in chapter 10 or chapter 4 or chapter 5. If I feel like I'm getting blocked, I'm like, okay, what excites me right now? And I'll just go boom, put all that down on paper. So there is no, in my opinion, one right or wrong way. And I think we all just need to stop judging ourselves so much about how we're working, how we're writing, how we're living, how we're making it through COVID. You know, I haven't picked up any new hobbies, anybody. I haven't finished my next book. I didn't bake. So I didn't do the sourdough starter craze or anything like that. You know, I did it my way. Isn't that a great song too, by the way?
Yeah.
Did it my way.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. There was another word that was shared by Dr. Baker here, and it was insecurities, right? A lot of times we tend to be our own worst critics. We always feel I'm going to apply for that job when I'm going to be adequate enough, where I'm going to have XYZ degree, achieve those milestones, and I'm going to go and challenge myself, and hopefully I'll get there. So why can you tell us about insecurities and how we can overcome those? Because we all have our own unique abilities, and we just have to feel more empowered and less criticized.
I'd love to know how Allie managed to, I mean, athletes, I don't know how you do that. And I can only imagine what it's like to compare yourself to somebody that maybe beats you by a second. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, I didn't get anywhere near as far as I wanted to go with that sport. I think really it was the wrong sport for me. I should have been doing something a lot safer like table tennis. But I certainly feel it's helped me a lot in the rest of my life, that experience as an athlete. I consider myself a failed athlete, really. But I think that experience really of, you know, you take a lot of falls, you get smashed, you have to pick yourself up, bruised and hurting, maybe injured, and try again and keep trying. So you have to have, you know, faith and just a refusal to give up, a grim sort of determination. And yeah, it does help you a lot in the rest of your life. You can apply that to, you know, your work and everything else. So it's helped me a lot as a writer to have that focus, that determination. If you're writing things, you often get rejections from, you know, agents or publishers or publications. And yeah, you just have to keep trying again. When it came time to submit my book to agents, I got 4 straight rejections very rapidly within about 24 hours from the first set of agents. So I could have just given up and abandoned that plan. But then I looked through my work and I ruthlessly tried to improve it and didn't give up. And I sent it out again. And the next time was completely different. I had 4 agents that wanted to see more and that were very interested in taking me on. So I'm just, yeah, never give up. That would be my message.
Thank you. Laura, Dr. Baker, do you have anything else to add to Ellie's response?
Yeah, sure. I'll add. You know, insecurities come up all the time for all of us, and we, you know, like as you mentioned before, we have to be a little bit less hard on ourselves. But for me, there were just growing up, you know, so many things that kind of fed into those insecurities, between the teasing and, you know, the teacher telling my mother that maybe I should go to trade school because I didn't seem like I had, you know, the gumption to continue. So it took a lot of digging, you know, but also it took a whole group of cheerleaders around me who helped me realize that, no, you can do this. And then me actually believing it, that you can do this. So the insecurities are always there, and they pop up at the weirdest times. When I actually finished writing my book and I reached out to two of my very dear friends who agreed to be my beta readers, they will tell you that I was nervous. I said, I feel so vulnerable. I feel like I'm stepping in front of you naked and now you're going to judge me. So it was one of those things that was very difficult, but it was necessary. And again, it helped with my own growth. So insecurities will continue to come up, but it's just really going in and realizing, like, yes, you can do this. Knowing your own limitations is also good, because sometimes we think we can conquer the world and we really just can't do it all the time, the way we want it. But it's good to face it and then do whatever we can to dig deep and overcome it.
That's so beautiful. I like what you just said about that. And Allie, you are not a failed snowboarder. I'm a failed snowboarder. I couldn't even stand up on it. That's a failed snowboarder. Okay. For me, insecurity rears its head in a lot of ways. And I've learned that one of the questions I like to ask myself when I'm feeling insecure is it true? Right? Is what I'm feeling insecure about really truth, or is it some fear I have or something that somebody else might have said to me? And I'll run through some lists of, well, yeah, maybe I've never published a book, and it won't be a bestseller. But you know what? I've had a newspaper column. I've written chapters in other books. I've done all these other things. And okay, am I insecure because I don't have the knowledge? Well, if that's the case, what do I need to get the knowledge? So I'll go through and ask myself, why am I insecure 5 times in a row? When I was presenting, I talked about why being my favorite question. And when you ask it of yourself versus others, because some people tend to get quite defensive when you ask them why, or as those of you watching who are parents, your kids will ask you why 1,000 times in a row. But asking yourself why 5 times actually helps you get to the real root of why you're feeling insecure. And it's helped me know that, I'm feeling insecure because I'm not sure the financial burden of something, or because I really don't know how to go out and get press or to do social media. I don't know how to find an editor. So you know what? I asked a bunch of friends of mine who are big authors, and I said, who was your editor? Or I went into the back, and everybody's got the acknowledgments in their book, right? And I looked at who their editors were, who their agents were, who their publishers were. And I started just doing research, and I found that my insecurities went away when I addressed what often was for me a lack of knowledge about how to go forward.
Thank you so much. Beautifully said and shared. I appreciate it. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to cover all of the topics and all of the questions that I want to ask you and learn from you and grow with you together. But I want to say thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, wisdom, everything that has made you who you are today. So I want to give a chance to Russell to start with the closing remarks, and Marianne. And I want to also thank you, those who are attending the webinar. I know you'll be inspired and you'll want to have, you want to take action and you want to get something done either in your communities or looking forward to connect with our authors or start an initiative. So I can put my email in there. We can build on what we have shared today, and we can start a book club within our sister cities communities to promote our authors. And I think the sky is the limit once we put our thinking hat on and see what we can get and how we can motivate and inspire each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Julia. And thank you everybody for making this event. I was going to say evening, but I can't say evening. But thank you for making this event so special. And I just got to say, just for Greater Fort Lauderdale Sister Cities, I can't begin to tell you how our organization would have never been where it is without the endless sacrifices of the women that you see here, and some of the other women members that are not here today. They just really brought this organization to a level that I could never done on my own or could even dream of. So I'm just so grateful for what we have. And just thank you for this wonderful panel. And it's just so cool to see everyone from around the world, or everyone from the different backgrounds. It was fascinating hearing about Suriname and what Dr. Baker went through. And as you were saying that, I do vaguely remember reading those stories about that. Now that you mentioned that, the dictator that was there is long, and I'm trying to recall it. I'm looking it up. And Australia, England, and just all that y'all brought to the event today. So thank you very much. And this is really a special evening, and it's really enriched me too. So thank you.
Julia, my closing remarks to all the panelists. I've tried to write a chat, but somehow I don't think I even know how to write a chat, let alone write a book. So I would just say that as I listen to these inspiring women, and all these comments that we've received in the chats are about the inspiration that they've had, I can only relate what I've experienced watching my grandchildren write their essays to apply to college and to get the attention of the admissions officers at those colleges. What a wonderful way to help them understand how to express themselves through reading. All of you spoke about your youth and the importance of reading. I hope the technology, all you technology geeks, would tell me that more people are reading, that it's okay. There's still books being bought, that people are still reading, and just keep encouraging people to read, and encouraging me as well. But thank you. I've learned a lot. And I know, thanks to our other members of our sister city organization, we have a representative from Brazil participating with us, and we have some of our other board members, Rhonda Goodman, and so Zeynep, our Turkey representative. Love you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate everyone. And I would like to present you with the virtual certificate of appreciation. Normally we'll do this on a personal settings, and you'll get a framed certificate, but we hope we can do this in the future. But this is also a very good medium platform. And thank you all. And also I would like to extend the certificate of appreciation to Katrina. She's joining us virtually. Unfortunately, I cannot add her to the panel because the way we formatted the Zoom meeting. But thank you for the support and for your contribution to keep our sister cities connected. And every single time when we have a need and we're reaching out, you're always there for us to facilitate and promote our initiatives. I hope that we're all leaving today here more inspired and more motivated to do something with our communities, within our communities, and change and take it to the next level. I appreciate you all. Thank you.